Welcome to My Body, My Bump, My Baby, where we help women be empowered, intentional mothers. This podcast is best enjoyed sipping tea or taking a stroll in nature. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be substituted for professional psychological or medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, midwife, or other qualified health provider with any questions about your personal situation, health, or medical condition. Welcome to another episode of My Body, My Bump, My Baby. Today we have an extra special treat. We are going to hear from our friend Jenn, who is going to share another beautiful birth story for you. Jenn, how are you?
I'm good, B. How are you doing today?
I'm so good, and I'm so glad to have you telling us your birth story. How old is your little one?
She is 7 now.
Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. You know, we talk about this a lot on the podcast about birth being one of those moments in your life where you'll always remember it like yesterday. And it was so exciting to me when you reached out and you wanted to share your beautiful birth story, because I know some time has passed and I'm like, God, I know that it's just like yesterday for you though.
Yeah, definitely. And, I was so lucky to have you and another doula available there during the process. And it's amazing. I only have one biological child, so this was it for me. And it was definitely something I never planned to do. I got into my 30s, and I was kind of like, being pregnant might be something I'd like to see and experience, but it really wasn't even about having the kid, which is crazy. It was just like more like, I want to see what my body does, which is so weird, right?
Actually, I love that. And I actually didn't know that about you.
I never dreamed about having children. It was just more, I knew that I was getting to a point that I wouldn't be physically able to anymore. So it was kind of like, now I'm curious about that. And so then I kind of redirected my life to put that in motion for myself. Not that this is the only way to do it, but for me, I wanted to make sure that I was married. I wanted to make sure that I was in a partnership to start. For me, that meant it had to be legally binding. And then right away, I mean, we got married, and within like 3 months, we were pregnant, because that was like my mission.
Oh my gosh.
So I had known him a long time and everything else. And he knew the schedule he was on. So we were ready.
I mean, I think he met the schedule, huh? Yeah.
He did.
3 months. That's pretty good.
He met the deadline. Yes. He did a good job.
So when like you were on like maybe date 3 and you pretty much laid it out for him, like, hey, look at
this is no joke, because we worked together for years, and so once we made that transition from friendship to starting to kind of date, that's what I told him, was because he already had a child. So I was like, this is it for me. Like, I just want you to know that I fully intend that I want to have a kid, and if you don't, then we can't go any further. And he was like, no, I've always wanted to have more kids. So I was like, okay, cool, we'll keep pursuing this.
Perfect. I love that. I mean, there's something wonderful about being a woman who is older and really like established and going out. Like, I did that to my husband too. I mean, it wasn't around babies, but I'm like, hey, look, you know, I'm older. I'm not playing games. Like, here's what I want.
Yep.
Either you can do it or you can't. But let me know, because I don't want to waste time on you.
Exactly.
I was 35 when we were dating, so I'm like, you're like, I don't got time to waste.
No time to waste. So so that was, as funny as it is now, reflecting back on it, I wasn't about like, I have to have a family and I have to have children. It was more about like, my body can do this, and I don't want to go through this lifetime and not experience what my body can do. And of course it was amazing, and I fell in love with my child while she was inside me and all that kind of stuff. And I knew that was going to happen, but it was just, but that was kind of like my impetus of wanting to like get pregnant.
I love that. Well, you're not alone. I hear a lot of women who are like, well, this is going to sound strange, but, I just want to have that experience. And then, of course, everybody, of course, I will love the baby and it'll be wonderful. But the draw for me is like, I want to have this experience in my body.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember the first time I was feeling my daughter move inside me. I didn't really recognize, because at least for me, the way it felt was flutters, and I didn't really recognize that that's what it was. And I was a heavy meditator. And so I remember at the time, and I remember meditating and like, what is going on with my like, what is that in my stomach? And then I think probably it was my doula that helped me like realize like, you know, that's you feeling your kid move. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I had no idea. Like, so.
I love that. I love that. So yeah, for you, it was a flutter. I think like some people call it like butterfly, like a butterfly fluttering around in there, right?
Yeah.
And then some people mistake it for gas.
Yeah.
I've just been very gassy lately, but you know.
No, it's your child moving around.
Yeah, right. Right.
So yeah, amazing.
Jenn, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I want to highlight the fact that you are a yogi and you're a yoga teacher because at some point in your story, I'm very curious if that comes into play for you.
Oh my goodness, it does. That's so funny you asked that. So yes, I am. I've been a yoga teacher for 9 years. That's not my career though. I would say that is my hobby. So I've been in human resources for over 20 years, and I'm mainly been in government contracting. So that's like my career. But when it comes to the yoga, it's so funny that you bring that up, because I was going through my 200-hour teacher training program, and everybody in my program knew I was trying to get pregnant during the program, and I got pregnant at the end. And the session where I knew I was pregnant was when Carrie Quinn came to teach prenatal yoga, and I didn't want anyone to know I was pregnant yet, so the couple of people that I trusted, they were asking Carrie all these questions for me on my behalf. So
you had like sent them on errands?
I did. I was like, I want to know about this and this and this, because it was so, I was still so blown away. I think, well, I can't speak for all women, but at least for me, it was like, obviously I was trying to get pregnant, but when that pregnancy test says positive, it's like, you're just so in disbelief. You're like, is this really happening? Like, really happening? Is this really true? But the other big thing that I had was a big part of this program was to go up to Shoshone, which is this ashram up in the mountains. And so you spend a weekend there, and you're supposed to, like, you go, you get up really early, you meditate, you do yoga and all these things. And we had gone up the month prior, and the whole ride up, I thought I was pregnant. And we got up there, and I got my period, and I was like, all right, I'm not pregnant. And it was only my second month trying, but I was so disappointed. And that morning, it was like a 5:30 a.m. practice. Everybody went off to this like fire ritual thing. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to meditation. I was the only one that chose to go to meditation. And I had this entire experience where in my meditation, I felt this gold light come behind me and felt like a hand on my back. And I knew, and I get emotional every time I talk about it, because I knew that was my daughter's spirit, and I knew she was coming. And then the next month I was pregnant. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. When you said you were pretty sure you were pregnant and then your period came, I was thinking, her essence was with you. And then you actually had a validation experience of her essence being with you. So you could kind of feel her presence before she actually joined in a physical form.
Yep. So I've always referred to her as my little like spiritual yoga baby, because like I just and I always have I've always held on to that. So I felt her before she was here. Like I felt her spirit choose me, which I was just like, this is just amazing. So yeah, and so there you go. That relates to like how I bring yoga into it for myself, because I wouldn't have gone to Shoshone and had that experience if I hadn't been in that program for teacher training.
Right. Right. And you maybe you would have, but possibly you wouldn't have even felt that feeling like, I know.
Yeah, I don't think I would have been open to it, definitely, or recognized what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think there's something about yoga that really just kind of opens you up to some stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So you got pregnant. You got that positive on the stick. What next? What happened for you after that? Was it like, I'm just going to kind of, hang out, enjoy? Were you just like, I need all the info? Like, what was your next steps after that?
Well, I'm all the info person. I need all the info. And getting pregnant at 35, I was considered a geriatric mother of advanced maternal age. And so immediately when I went to the doctor, it's, you're in all these special appointments and they're recommending all these special tests. And I'm very healthy. I just didn't really feel like that was necessary. And through my yoga studio, there was an advertisement for Enzo. And I knew Carrie Quinn, one of the folks that used to be a part of the organization. And so I started talking to her about it, because I didn't even know what a doula was. I was like, "What do you do?" Because I didn't know what a doula was. I knew what a midwife was, but what's the difference? I mean, I know all this now, but at the time, so I talked with her and she explained everything. And really, what I understood was the doula is an advocate for me and helps me, brings in the science and the medical knowledge, but helps me make better informed decisions about what I want to do for myself. And I really appreciated that, because every time, and my doctors were great. I had no issues with my doctors, but every time my doctors would tell me something, it always just felt so extreme, because they're like, "Well, you're older. Everything was like, you're older." And I'm just like, okay. And then I would talk to Carrie and she'd be like, no, you're fine. This is why they're saying this. This is the medical guidance that they're giving you, but here's some other pieces of medical guidance. So these are your options and what you can choose to do. And what I loved about it, I never felt like, my doula is telling me what to do. I felt like I was getting missing pieces of the information, because we know the Western world, they only have a certain amount of time for their patients. They can't spend hours with you. But I never felt like that with my doula. I didn't spend hours with her, but I felt like she had that time for me if I needed it. So that was my way of getting all of the information. And then, of course, I did all the birthing classes with Enzo. I did everything that you all offered, because I'm also a bit of a perfectionist. I'm like, I'm going to do this right.
Well, I mean, your whole goal was to have this experience. So,
Exactly.
Of course, you're like, I want to do it wholly. I want to have the
Exactly.
whole experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you went to the doctor and they would give you information that was kind of a little bit scary or kind of throwing you off, and then you would go to the doula and ask the doula. Was it just would you call the doula up and just be like, "Hey, they said this and it's really upsetting me"? Or was it I feel like there's something more to this, or something's off? What was your gut instinct? What was the driving force to talking to the doula and then finding out oh, actually there are other options, or oh, actually they're making me very scared, but it's probably not that big of a deal?
In the beginning, it was more there has to be more to this. And I bet my doula will have that information. And of course, there were lots of books that she recommended. I read them all, things like that. But at the end, I would say, when I was getting close to term, that's when I felt like they were using scare tactics on me. And I feel like it was my doula support that helped me push back, because I was at a point where I hit 40 weeks and I wasn't dilated. And so this was creating all this panic for the doctors that I wasn't dilated. And so I remember the doctor leaving the room, because it was a practice. So I had different doctors I would see, whoever was available when I went. And so the doctor left, and I remember the doctor telling me, "Well, you're not dilating. And so you're probably going to have to schedule an induction," and just letting you know. It was very casual and matter of fact, because of course he does this all day, and he left. And so I was with my husband in the exam room, and I just started crying, because I just felt like my body is failing me.
Aww.
Why can't I do this? Why am I not doing this?
How many weeks were you then?
40 weeks.
Oh, and so they're you are at your due date,
Yep.
I guess, and they're
you're dilated. You're not
Nothing's
dilated.
happening.
Yeah, nothing's happening, and this baby's got to get out. So that was definitely scary. So then I went. I got myself together, and we go meet the doctor in his office. Well, he's on the phone with the hospital scheduling the induction, and looking at me and "Well, does Saturday work at this time?" And what I said to him was, I said, "Whoa, I didn't agree to that." And he put the phone down immediately and just stared at me. And I was like, "I didn't agree to that. I need to think about my options," because I wanted to talk to my doula. I didn't tell him that, but that's what I was thinking. And so we left, and that was the one phone call, I'll say, that I called my doula crying. And I couldn't even speak. I had to have my husband speak to her, because I was so upset. And what she explained to me again was, she said, "You're actually not in danger yet. You can go to 42 weeks as long as your placenta is intact. They have not mentioned anything. You don't have," and I don't remember all the issues,
right.
medical stuff, but you don't have any of that. So you don't have to do this yet if you don't want to. And then she gave me a whole bunch of different remedies and things you can do to try to induce labor. I did them all to the extreme. Nothing worked, but she gave me all of that. So I would say I was very appreciative to have that support. And then by the time I reached 42 weeks, it was a different doctor that I was at. She was much softer in her approach with me, but she was like, you're at 42 weeks. It's time. Like,
I had forgotten that you were like really up against the wall on this. I mean, I do remember the details of the actual labor part, but I didn't realize we were up like at 42 weeks. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And she actually showed me on the sonogram, she was showing me where like the placenta was starting to break down, but she didn't do it in a scary way. She did it in a matter of fact way and was like, it's definitely time.
It's time now.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And then of course, speaking to my doula, she was like, I would agree with you at this point. You don't want to carry a baby past 42 weeks because now you're definitely
it's dangerous.
At risk.
Yeah.
So I went in and started the induction process.
Jenn, before we get into your actual birth story, what kind of labor experience were you planning for yourself?
Sure. I was planning the most natural granola hippie birth possible, known to man. I wanted to have a water birth in my home with candles and music and a midwife and maybe invite some friends. I mean, it was just like, not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but that is not me. I'm kind of like, I would say I'm kind of, if you have a scale of like hippie to corporate, I'm kind of in the middle. But yeah, I was so into like having the most natural, like spiritual experience. And this child is going to be like, I don't know, ushered into the world.
I love it.
Yeah. So my husband said no. And the reason he said no is because with his son, he had a very traumatic birth experience where his son was emergency C-section and his son almost died and his son's mother almost died.
Oh, wow.
He still remembers the blood and like he was just like, I can't do that. I'm not doing that. So I was like, okay, I understand. And so we wound up visiting this birth center up in Denver somewhere, if they're still around. I'm sure they're still around. They were really well established. And we went up there, and they do all these water births and all these things. And, of course, I loved it. And I was like, well, this is the compromise. We'll come here. And he's like, Jenn, we're not going to drive an hour and a half when you're in labor, like screaming, like yelling. I'm in Denver traffic. Your doula's trying to get here. Like, I'm not doing that. And I was like, okay, I understand. So I conceded and agreed that we would do a hospital birth in town in Colorado Springs. But I was very adamant that I wanted to have a vaginal delivery. I had made up this whole story with myself that there's no Pitocin. Once you go to Pitocin, then you've got epidural, then it's automatic C-section, and I am not doing a C-section. It's not happening. I was born C-section. My brother was born C-section. I've read a lot about different health problems people can potentially have because of that.
Health problems that you've had.
Yes.
You had,
yeah. One of the ones that I have is I have a digestive disease, which I'm not shy about or anything, but some of the studies I've read has been like there's a high percentage of children that are born C-section that have this particular disease because they didn't have all the good bacteria in their system I guess you get a bunch of good bacteria when you are born vaginally.
Right.
So I was like adamant, my daughter is not going to have this disease. And so I'm going to do everything I can to usher her into this world naturally. So that was my plan. Vaginal delivery in the hospital then. I conceded for my husband, but I didn't want like any chemicals, nothing. It was just going to all happen and my body would just do it.
But here you are. You're at 42 weeks and they're saying nothing's happening.
Yes.
You're not dilated. We need to get the baby out because
Yes.
the placenta's getting old. It's going to fail here soon. So then what happened with your plan?
Yeah. So you have to be flexible with your plan. I went to the hospital with my birth plan. I do believe that they were very respectful of it. I don't think that they stuck it in a file and ignored it. I mean, I do think they were very respectful of what I was trying to do.
I think so too.
Yeah. I didn't feel like they weren't trying to honor it. I felt like I made every call in there. But so we got to the point, so we checked in for the induction to start. And so it started really late in the night. It starts with them inserting something into you that, again, I don't remember. I just remember it's something that's natural.
Was it like a pill or a powder or something like that?
Maybe a pill. Maybe that's what it was. And they were saying to me, like, okay, well, this is the way we start induction. We're going to try this natural approach. And so, of course, I was very stubborn. I'm like, well, the natural approach will work for me. So this is it. This is, I will have this baby by tomorrow.
You're like, this is going to be the thing that does it.
Yeah, exactly.
For the listeners, so the hospital was trying to get her cervix to efface or to ripen, and that's what they were using. It actually was a drug, but I mean, it's external. It's not like something you took. Well, did they do it vaginally or orally?
Vaginally.
Okay, yeah, so they put it vaginally. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. I totally didn't even remember that part. So then that night, trying to sleep, they had me on the fetal monitor constantly because, I'm 36 years old, so I'm a geriatric mother, according to them, and so they have to watch me all the time. I will say the fetal monitor was very tough because it really... it doesn't allow you to walk around, and that's just you're kind of stuck in this one little place, walking back and forth. So that was definitely challenging. And then, of course, when you need to use the restroom, you have to alert everybody because they have to figure out how to get you rolling in there and everything. But the next morning, woke up, and at that point, I was just I barely slept, so nervous, so anxious. And they came in and checked me, and they said, "You're still not dilated. We're going to have to start Pitocin. But before we start that, we want you to eat a breakfast. We want you to eat a good, solid breakfast because you need it." And I ordered it, and I could barely eat. I was so nervous. I just was let's just get this kid out of me. How is this going to happen? And so they started the Pitocin, and I do remember from birth class learning that when you start that, when you're doing natural labor, your body learns to adjust the steps as you go. But when you get Pitocin, it's starting way up at a high level. And I would say I have, I'm somebody with really high endurance. I've got high resilience. I'm pretty tough. And that was really rough.
Intense.
It was intense. And I remember that was the point where I remember telling my husband, you need to call, and I think it was you. I was you got to call B, because I knew B was on call for me at that. I was you have to call B. And he was already? I'm yes. I need somebody here. Because I knew, it was so intense. I was I get it. This is why women move to, epidural and C-section so fast. Because this is, I don't even know if I can manage this. I'm supposed to do this for hours. It was insanely intense. And so B got there and was super supportive. And I remember... you in between contractions, you just asking me questions. And one of the things that you explored with me is has your water broke? And I was no, nothing's happening. And you were well, this is kind of your choice, but you can tell them to turn off the Pitocin because your water hasn't broke. So there's really no danger right now. So if you want, we can try a breast pump and stimulate your nipples. And that potentially could maybe start things moving. It's, we could try it. And I was oh my God, yes, let's try it. I remember the nurse came in, we buzzed the nurse. She came in and I told her, I want to be taken off the Pitocin. I want to try something different. We told her what we were going to do, or I told her what we were going to do. And she was well, we don't recommend that. We don't, we're going to call your doctor and let your doctor know. And I was that's fine. Let my doctor know, but this is what I want. And so
I was so happy that you were able to really advocate for yourself there, because that made a huge, huge difference. And I remember the look on her face when you told her what too. She was clink, clink, what? What? You on the what?
Yeah.
And even though she was giving you that look what the heck? You were yeah, but this is what I want to do.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have to do what you say right now. And I know they're just doing their job. There was no ill will at all towards anybody, but you're right. I think they were just caught off guard. They're just used to, they got their routine down. They're not used to a deviation from the plan.
My guess is you are probably her first patient who has ever asked to do that.
Oh, wow.
Because that's the look that she get. What I was seeing was you want to what? And probably in her mind, can I do that? I don't even know if I can do that. I don't know. I didn't do
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
wow. Well, that's cool. Maybe she'll always remember me then.
She probably will.
That's good. That's good. Making change. So we turned off the Pitocin and things calmed down. Unfortunately for me, just not having slept well and barely eaten, for me, looking back, I think I was just already so depleted. And here I am starting the process. And I was just already so depleted. And so I remember B had me sit on a yoga ball and start kind of moving my hips around. And we attached the breast pump, which, of course, at the time I had no idea how to use. But she had prepared me to make sure you bring a bag with all these things. And so I had it. So she was showing.
Which I'm so grateful you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen to your doula. Do what they say.
I've had so many where I'm did you bring the breast pump? They're no, we didn't. I'm killing me, Smalls.
Well,
but you did. You had it there.
Well, hopefully they hear this podcast and then they will know. Like, bring the breath. It sounds crazy.
It sounds so weird.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but it worked. And as soon as we started doing that, I started feeling the contractions in a different way. It didn't feel so intense and like really like scary. It felt, I mean, it was uncomfortable. Trust me, it hurts, but it was not, it just wasn't the way it was before. It felt like my body was in sync. My body was like working what it was supposed to be doing. And it started working, and I started dilating, and I started actually going through like normal labor, I would say.
You said some things to me at that point.
Oh, God, I don't remember. You have to tell me.
It literally changed so much for me as a doula and also as a childbirth educator.
Yeah.
You were the first person that, like, in the moment could compare. I've had mothers who could, like, oh, the first baby I had a Pitocin induction, and then the second baby I had natural, and it was, you know, the difference was really big. Mm-hmm. But you're the first person that, like, 1 minute had Pitocin and then the next minute didn't have it. Mm-hmm. And right there, when the shift happened, when the Pitocin was out of your body, and then we were only doing nipple stimulation, which was creating what would naturally happen in your body, mm-hmm. you said a few things that were huge for me. Mm-hmm. You literally described the difference in the experience. So you said it was like the contractions with the Pitocin were like they would peak really, really hard and fast. And at the peak, you said it like literally felt like somebody was jabbing a knife and twisting it in you. Mm. And they were really long. And the one thing that really stood out in my mind that you said, you had no longer had the feeling of like excitement and joy and love about having your baby. Yeah. And as soon as that turned off, you said, you know, this is hard. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. It's still hard. But each time I get one of these really hard contractions, I also get like excitement and love and these good feelings for my baby. And you were like, and those were not there with the drug.
I totally remember saying that to you now that you're saying that.
That was so huge for me. You know, we release oxytocin, which is a natural version of what they synthetically created, Pitocin. Mm-hmm. But what it misses is that very important part. And you were saying, you said, you know, with these feelings, like now I know why, I remember why I'm doing it, and it feels doable. Mm-hmm. Like I feel the love, I feel the excitement for my baby, and even though this is really hard, like I feel like I can do it, whereas before I didn't have any of that, and there was just no way.
Yeah. Yep. I totally, I would totally agree with that still, and I still remember it like mm-hmm. that. Yeah, because there's definitely you're connected when it's happening without that. Now, of course, I want to say there's people that are going to need that, and I respect that. That's why those tools are there. But I didn't need it. Mm-hmm. I needed the natural stuff. And I guess for me, it was just time, and I needed the breast pump. And maybe that's, maybe looking back, that's something that maybe if I had tried that, earlier on, maybe that's something that would have worked. I don't know. But in that moment, that's what I needed.
Well, you needed the effacement. So that mm-hmm. part with the little pill that they inserted, that part you needed before we could do the breast pump. And so we did need that intervention. But I feel like we just needed to kind of do a couple little things to kickstart your body and into like, oh, let's have a baby.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. So we trudged on the path for that for a while. I do remember, now again, I'm on the fetal monitor. So my movement, unfortunately, was very limited. I feel like if I had been able to take off that fetal monitor and walk around more, I probably would have been able to, I guess, tolerate it longer. But I also look back, and of course my daughter is 7 now and completely healthy and, happy and super smart and everything else. So I will say that. But I remember B was like trying to switch my positions like on the hospital bed and all these different things as I was going through contractions.
As we were like tethered to the heart rate monitor.
Yeah. And so we finally reached a point, like I remember she had me on like a position on all my fours, and something about that position, my whole back just like seized up. And I just remember it feeling like I can't even move. Like it was such a I can't describe it, but it was at that moment I was like, I need an epidural. And I remember you were like, really? And I was like, yeah, I'm good with it. I really am good with it, because I knew I could just feel like I'm so depleted right now. Like there's so much more to go, and I don't know if I can do this. And at that point in my mind, like, I'm like, that's okay. Like, I know that this is the right thing for me. Like, all that stuff I had created about, like, this, like, story of, like, how the birth was going to happen. I'm so proud of myself looking back that I was able to be, like, flexible in the moment, because that's not my personality. But I was just kind of like, nope, this is what I need. And I remember my husband checking too. Are you sure? And I was
because
like,
we didn't want you to have regrets.
Of course.
Right? We wanted, because we knew what you wanted, and you had worked really hard for that. And we definitely were like, oh gosh, I don't want her, like, one, I didn't want you to have a regret. And two, I didn't want you to, like, look back on it and be like, why did you guys let me tap out?
Yeah.
Like, I could have, you know, so I think we were both like, are you really sure? Like, we don't want to fail you now.
And I felt that from the both of you.
Yeah.
I really did. I felt like you were totally on my side, and really checking in. Because I remember when I pushed the button and the nurse came in, and I remember she said the same thing. Are you sure? Like, because we're like, we have a birth plan from you that says, like, no drugs.
Right.
So I do feel it. Yeah, I think there were lots of opportunity for me to you know, back out of it if I wanted to. Yeah. But I just knew that that was the right thing for me. And I remember that doctor coming in and, you know, injecting me with it, and, you know, totally joking around with me, because of course he's probably proud of his job. He gets to be the savior. So he like came in, but I remember he was super nice. And then the epidural kicked in. But what he told me was, which I appreciated, he said, I'm not going to give you a full epidural. I'm only going to give you a little bit of an epidural. He's like, you're still going to be able to feel your legs, and you're going to still be able to feel everything. And I said, you know something, that works for me.
Yeah.
So to me, like, whether he just chose that or they read my birth plan, like, that I really appreciated, because I didn't know that was an option, that I could say just a little epidural, not the whole thing.
Right.
So then I got my little mini epidural, and I think at that point...
How much could you feel? Do you remember?
I remember being able to feel almost everything. I mean, I definitely would feel like... I remember thinking, like, oh, if I had to get up right now, someone would probably have to help me walk. But I wasn't numb. I mean, I could feel my legs and my feet and my toes and everything. So it was just, like, again, like you were just saying, the Kickstarter, I think I just needed to relax. Like, I just really needed that. And I remember at that point, I don't know if it was exactly that, but I know at some point in there you had to tag out, because I think you had, like, another birth or something. And then Carrie, the next doula, came in later. And I remember, like, I was probably laying there for a few hours just talking to her, like, just hanging out. And I remember she nicely at one point suggested that maybe I should get some sleep, but I was, like, so amped up. I was like, I can't sleep. Like, I can't sleep right now. Like, we're getting closer. Like, this is going to happen. So I would say, looking back, I probably should have slept, but it's okay.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, it is. Well, and it's like, you know, you're tethered to all these machines and cords. It's like, it's not like, you know, you're relaxing here. So then I remember, like, they kept checking on me periodically. And then at one point, one of the doctors came in and said, okay, you're 10 centimeters. I was like, really? Oh my God, Yay. This is amazing. It's finally happening.
Yay.
So I would say, like, for me, the pushing process was probably the most intense out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I've heard all sorts of things from my doula, Carrie, that was there, like her side of it. But we started the pushing, and I immediately was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't even describe how the pushing feels. You are just push, like, in the beginning you're just pushing, but you don't feel like you're pushing anything, and you're just like, and I know all that terminology that's cliche, especially for the new mothers, like bear down. I mean, that kind of imagery does make sense to me now that I've been through it. But it was just funny, like, how you're taking an inhale and you're exhaling and pushing, but it's like, pushing what? Like, what?
It's a little bit counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, you know, like, we know, just because of, you know, taking classes and stuff like that, you know the baby's coming out of your vagina.
Sure.
So they're like, push. Well, then instinctively you're like, well, I know how to push through my vagina, so I'm going to push there. And that doesn't do anything, right? It's so weird.
Yeah.
Right? And tell you, like, I think the best way, you know, to describe it is like you got to push like you're pushing out a poop.
Yeah.
Which is like totally counterintuitive. Like, what do you mean like I'm pushing out a poop? The baby's not coming out of my butt.
Right.
But,
right. Yeah. I don't even know, but somehow you figure it out, like where they're telling you to push.
Yeah.
And of course the baby's dropping more, so you're starting to feel
the
that.
pressure.
Yeah, you're feeling the pressure, and then the pressure's like, it gets really intense at some points. But for me, the pushing was really intense. And so the doctor kept wanting me to lay flat on my back, and I kept rolling kind of diagonal on my side. And he kept telling me to lay flat on my back, and I kept yelling at him because I was like, I'm not laying flat on my back because it hurts. Because every time I laid on my back, whatever I had done with my back, when we were in that
hands and knees.
Yeah, hands and knees, it was still killing. And so I couldn't lay that way. And what my doula told me later was that, you were getting stuff all over his shoes. So he was trying to adjust you so you would stop doing that. And I was like, oh, well, too bad, so sad. Sorry. But I would say that, he kept telling me lay on your back. And I was like, no, I'm doing it like this. So we were doing all sorts of different techniques, like with the scarf and all these things to help me push and bear down and everything else. I remember when I started the process, I looked at the clocks. I had this huge clock in front of me, and I remember thinking, why do they put a clock here? That's
it's
dumb.
horrible.
Yeah.
It's right in front of you. Yes. I hate that.
Because I looked up and I'm like, it's 9 o'clock. And my daughter wasn't born until a little bit after 11, so that's how long this pushing went on. At one point, and the nurses were great. I will say they were amazing. They were massaging me the whole time.
Nice.
I only had one tiny little tear. I mean, they were totally taking care of me. At one point, there was a little conference in the side of the room between the nurse and the doctor, 2 nurses and a doctor. And Carrie and my husband were with me. But I was very aware of this little conference going on. And I'm like, they're talking about doing a C-section, and I'm not doing it. So we're going to see. I could tell. And what I found out later from Carrie was that the nurses wanted to do a C-section. But what the doctor said was, this is not unusual for a first-time mother to have to push for 2 hours. Yeah. So she's good. So he, even though he didn't want his shoes dirty, he did tell them, no, she doesn't need a C-section. Right. So I'm glad for that, because we weren't in danger at all. It was just my baby's heart rate was fine. I was just tired, and everything else. But we just kept it up and kept pushing. And then, you reach that point, which I think it's transition, right? B is when you reach that point where you're like, you want to give up.
Sometimes in transition and sometimes in pushing too, where you're just like, I'm so done, because you're tired, right?
Yes, because I remember I reached a point where I just looked at Carrie and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I really can't. I mean, and I wasn't going to do a C-section unless I had to. That I was pretty adamant about. And she was like, what did we teach you about how you're feeling right now? I was like, because the baby's almost here. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
So we have a saying, and it's with birth workers, period. Usually when a mom gives up hard, hard gives up, I can't, I'm done.
Yeah.
We believe that there is a rule with birth that a baby cannot come forward into this earth until a mom breaks just a little bit and gives a little piece of herself.
Oh God, that's so beautiful.
And so when a woman is like, I'm done, that's the crack.
Yeah.
That's the crack. That's the little okay, I'm giving that piece of myself. And as soon as she does that, 9 times out of the 10, the baby is right after.
Yep. Yeah. And that is what happened. I mean, I remember it was probably 3 big pushes right after. The next one, they were like, we see the head, you're crowning, the head's there, keep going. And then it was probably 2 more, and then she was out and in my arms, and it was amazing. And I was holding her. I was very well aware they were pushing on my stomach, pushing the placenta out, and I was aware that they were doing it, but I was so distracted by my baby. I was like, you can do whatever you want to me right now. They were giving me instructions, and they're going to, there's pressure. I'm like, okay, whatever, holding my baby. But yeah, it was amazing. And I will say the hospital honored everything we wanted done afterwards with our baby. I mean, she never left my side. She was with me the whole time. It was definitely amazing. And I'm so glad I got to experience it. And of course I have this beautiful child and I love her to death, and she's amazing.
And in the end, you achieved that vaginal birth. That was your goal, and you got it.
Yep. Yeah. And I've never looked back. And been like, oh, I wish I had never done the epidural. I've never looked back on that.
It was the right decision at that point. And I think you were right. I think you were just tired because you literally started the night before.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then was up the whole night and barely ate, and it just kind of went on. And of course then all the added anxiousness and stress on top of it. Right. So yeah, but no, I've never regretted any of that and how I did it. But you're right. My goal was a vaginal delivery, and I did that, and that's what I wanted to experience. So.
And you did it in a very empowered way. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you felt in control,
Yes.
even though it was an induction. Inductions can feel quite out of control, but you felt real in control. You felt heard. You felt supported.
Yes.
Like all of the boxes were checked. And the thing that was so beautiful is that birth rarely goes the way we plan.
Sure.
It's just not a thing.
Yep.
And so part of the whole process is our ability to kind of swim with what birth is dishing out. And you did that so darn well, right? I mean, okay, here we are. Now I have to have this induction. How am I going to do this and still feel empowered? And then here we are, and I'm having a hard time, and I need like pain support. And how am I going to do this and still feel empowered? And like each step of the road, you came to these little forks, and you're like, but you know what? This is how I want to do it. I feel good about it. I'm making this choice, and it's good. And in the end, you're coming out, and you're like, this was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. And it's, I'm only going to have one biological child in this lifetime. But what's incredible to me too is how much effort we put into the whole birth. And at least for me, the planning and the preparation. I mean, postpartum was fine, but I wish I had put as much time and effort into postpartum.
Because that's when the real deal begins.
Yeah, it was just like the birth. I don't want to say the birth is easy or nothing like that, but it just was it's just so funny how much when you're pregnant, your attention is this end goal of the birth, and it's that's not even the goal. That's the beginning of the whole thing.
It's like a little blip on the radar, right? Yeah. It's just like a little blip on the radar for the real deal.
Yes.
But it's hard. I think when you're pregnant, I think it's hard to see beyond this big, how do I get the baby out?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so hard to get beyond that point. Because I don't know, you see people with babies and you're like, clearly it's not that hard.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about that so much. But when I hear about a birth story, it sounds really scary, and people are like, oh man, you're going to need, this and that and this and that. So I just think the way we are structured right now just is harder to worry about that early postpartum, even though that early postpartum is really hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because that rocks your world. Because if you're like me and you had one kid, when you're pregnant, your life doesn't change that much. Your body changes and you're tired, and if you have morning sickness or whatever's going on, but the baby's there, that's wait a second, now my whole life is different.
Right.
My house is set up different. My routine is everything is different. There's no routine in the beginning. Everything's just different.
Right.
And so that's, I would say for folks that, have taken the time to listen this long, I would say that's something that don't lose sight of as well. Don't lose sight of your planning for what you're going to do and once the baby is out, and what you need to do for yourself. I learned at about 6 months, my daughter, her name's Riley, when she was about 6 months old, I started figuring out very quickly that I can't devote my life to her because I'm going to be miserable. And I know a lot of mothers that don't even figure that out until their children are long grown up. But I figured that out. If I don't take care of myself and do things for myself to make me happy, I'm not going to be a good mother to her. So there's a lot of
finding the balance a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that as much as we put so much time and attention on the birth process, definitely put some time and attention on the postpartum process as well, and what's going to work. So, yeah.
I like that. And so any suggestions as far as what kind of things do you mean as far as put attention on the postpartum process? What stands out in your mind as a biggie for you? Because there's that's a whole another episode. But
so I think the big two for me were breastfeeding and lack of sleep, I guess. I mean, I have a baby, I don't sleep, but you need to really prepare yourself for that. Really get ready for that.
Because it's not one night of sleep.
No.
It's a year of no sleep.
For us, it was 3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
So it just compounds. It takes a lot out of you.
Yeah. Now, I will say there's support out there. We did wind up hiring a pediatric sleep consultant that in 2 weeks, she was great. So, and we were just doing everything wrong. But for me, definitely the breastfeeding. I wound up having to be an exclusive pumper. So I committed to pumping for my daughter every 2 to 3 hours. And that included in the middle of the night for her first 11 months. And so that, and that was me just hell-bent that she had to have breast milk. There's absolutely nothing wrong with formula at all. And if I ever had a second child, which I'm not going to, if we had to do formula, it's fine.
But But you did give, give yourself credit. That whole situation that you were talking about with the cesarean and the seeding for the microbiome, we know now that the breast milk actually is the continuation. Like it feeds the initial seeding. The breast milk literally has things in there to feed the bacteria that were provided. And so even though you're like, that was a little bit crazy, I don't know, I would do that again. I think that your gut instincts were right on. Like,
thanks,
hopefully she's going to grow up and be a very healthy person. They're finding now that birth and breastfeeding, if any of those things break down, that they actually can lead to like non-communicable diseases like in 30s and 40s and allergies and all of these other things. So they're starting to be able to link it to these first moments.
Wow.
And so I know it's like, that sounds intense, right? And it probably was intense. And there's probably a lot, but gosh, you really did everything and you should feel like like I know I did everything that I possibly could to give this little girl the best that she possibly can, and it'll last for the rest of her life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that reminder. Because that was definitely, I was very committed to that process, and she has a lip tie, or had a lip tie, so the latching was very painful for me, and worked with consultants, everything else. And then one of the consultants was like, I think you need to exclusively pump, and I'll teach you how to do that. And so, and this is before, work from home was a thing. So I would drag my little breast pump to work, but I had it all situated. And this is what I'm talking about with the planning. I had an at-home pumping station, and then I had a portable pump that I rented that I would bring to the office, and eventually just left at the office, because eventually I was like, I need 2 pumps.
Right.
So I would say that making those kinds of preparations early, and then if you wind up not needing the breast pump, then you just
donate it.
Or you rent them. You can
rent them. Yeah.
I rented it from the hospital. So if you just return it if you don't need it. So definitely I would say that would be something for me from the postpartum experience. If you're really committed to wanting to breastfeed, don't be afraid to figure stuff about that now, you got the baby in you.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Because I think, in order to prepare for labor, you didn't just prepare for your super crunchy birth that you wanted, right? Like whether you wanted to or not, I'm sure we kind of forced you to think about, if there's this thing. Right. Think about if you're really tired and you might need an epidural. Yeah. Think about what happens if we have a cesarean. And I think what you're saying is the same is true. It's like, okay, I want to breastfeed, but know all the other options. Like think about if there's a tongue tie. Think about if you have to do a lot of pumping, or if you're away from the baby, all of the things, what is going to be your plan so that you're not kind of sideswiped after the baby comes. What the heck?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And definitely, I think it's great that you all have podcasts like this. So mothers to be can listen to all these different scenarios so they can think about all this kind of stuff.
Yes. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I think the whole idea is, one, there's so many horror stories out there. Yeah. There's so many horror stories that I think we as women are so separated from what birth is that we're just freaked, and we just want to bury our head in the sand and be like, I'm so excited to be pregnant. I'm so excited to have this baby, but I don't want to know how I'm going to get that baby. Right. I don't want to know about that part. And I think we need to get away from that. And so, having a story, yours is so unique and so wonderful, and I'm so glad that you could share, because it didn't end up being that crunchy granola home birth. Yep. It was everything but that, but it was still beautiful and empowered, which is the most important part, I think.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I wouldn't change a thing about it.
Yeah, it was perfect. And you did achieve your goal. You gave your baby what you wanted to give your baby, and you got to have the experience fully and come out of it feeling good.
Yep, absolutely. Well put, Bea.
Jenn, thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's so wonderful for me to go ahead and go down memory lane. I can't believe she's 7.
I know.
It's crazy.
I know. She's a full-on person now.
I love it. I love it. For the listeners, thank you for joining us again for another episode and another beautiful birth. Until next time.